work through the federal agencies to encourage this type of change. Next slide. The second piece is they'll cut funding for local. The second piece is that they'll cut funding for local job creating programs. All right, so Project 2025 proposes to destroy a program that plays a pivotal role in facilitating transformative economic growth for local economies. So during COVID, there was money that came out called the ARPA money. Many of we all benefited from those programs, the American Rescue Plan Act. And in that, those monies were used for various things. Some of them were used to ensure that our families had food when we had food insecurities, and still do have food insecurities throughout our country. But if we look at an Anne Arundel County Workforce Development Program, these are the kinds of local job creating entities that monies will be stripped from. So that's certainly something that we want to keep our eye on as it relates to this Project 2025. Next slide. And the other piece too, this is important, they want to manipulate data. And it's very important. So we have the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They want to really reduce the impact of these organizations, because at the end of the day, data tells everything. Data gives us our next steps, if you will. So if you're not really able to collect data that helps you really understand where the economy is going, then we suffer as consumers. And so I thought that was very notable, especially with all of us being working people across this nation, that they want to manipulate data so that businesses do rely on to keep our economy functioning. They want to tamper with those things. And we'll go to the next slide, please. The next piece we'll talk about tonight is for Americans to make ends meet. The next slide, please. All right. So we're going to just flow through the slides because I have very limited time. So the first piece is restrict access to food assistance. We talked about that briefly. So Project 2025 will make it harder for people to access food assistance by adding ineffective requirements and reevaluating important programs. Next. It would, in fact, eliminate the Head Start program. Project 2025 would destroy a program that is critical to uplifting children across the nation from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Many of us are familiar with the Head Start program, and that is of great detriment if we are unable to have those kinds of early childhood programs available for our young people. The next one is limit which disabilities qualify veterans for benefits. That is just unbelievable to me. How can you tell a veteran who served this country that we're going to limit whatever your ailments are to see whether or not you will qualify? The Project 2025 authors believe that too many veterans are qualifying for disability benefits. It's shameful. And then the next piece is removing safety nets for farmers. Project 2025 thinks that farmers are receiving too much assistance. If we look in Anne Arundel County now, not just in COVID, there is so much food insecurity, and farmers really were blessed in many ways during that pandemic because we were able to give fresh produce out to families. We were able to support local farmers. But with Project 2025, there will be a huge reduction in those pieces. Next slide, please. They also want to eliminate funding for key public transportation projects. So despite its transformational investments in communities across the country, investments grants is slated for elimination. And many communities, I know Anne Arundel also benefited from the CIG program as well. These things will be eliminated. Next, we'll move on to restricting reproductive rights and access to health care. We've seen in the news, you can move forward. We've seen in the news so much going on as it relates to women's rights and women's right to choose. The first thing is to keep the cost of life-saving medication too high. Project 2025 will undo Medicare's new ability to negotiate lower prescription prices for seniors. I spoke to some seniors yesterday right in the city of Annapolis, and they were blown away because there are going to be less options with this Project 2025 rollout if it is rolled out. Very unfortunate. In medication abortion use or make it incredibly difficult to access. If you've seen the news, there was a young lady who was from Georgia who, elected to have that procedure and was unable to do it in the state of Georgia. She had to drive to North Carolina, and they gave her some kind of medication. Unfortunately, the long story short, she came back home to Georgia, and because of the fear, the doctor's fear of going to jail, they allowed her to die. She was there for 20 hours when she needed a simple procedure, but she ended up passing away. And so that is quite unfortunate. But we wanted to just make sure that you all were aware that these are the kinds of medical restrictions that they are considering with Project 2025. And how do they do it? Limit which disabilities qualify veterans. I think it's important. I think that was already in there, but this is also something too in terms of with medical, to reiterate with veterans in terms of their medical. Next slide. So they will also push people towards private Medicare plans that worsen healthcare outcomes under the guise of saying, hey, there's a greater choice, which is not actually true. Project 2025 will push policies that favor private and worsen performing alternatives to Medicare. Next slide. So the other piece is it makes it easier for extremists to access personal information about patients' reproductive care, which is very unfortunate. Project 2025 removed protections that the Biden administration put in place post the Dobbs decision to protect the personal information of people who receive reproductive care. Women should have the right to not, have their information out to anybody. And I just think that is just so unfortunate that is where the country's going if Project 2025 is enacted. This next category, enable discrimination across society. They want to embolden racial discrimination in everything from housing to education to employment. Anything that affects the people at a regular daily basis, they want to, in particularly with civil rights protections, Project 2025 wants to attack those things. Then also making it harder for historically under-resourced communities to access Medicaid, Head Start, and government programs. So the big piece with these programs is something called population counts, right? And it can be essential to groups receiving appropriations or receiving monies and resources from the federal government. So Project 2025 plans to undercount or undermine the accuracy. So the more children you have, the more money you get, right? So they want to, again, we talked a few slides before, tampering with data, because data informs everything we do. So when you tamper with those agencies and you say, hey, a center only has 50 children coming in every week when they really have 500, there's a different level of resources. Next slide. And then undermine gender equity across the government. So of course, we've heard a lot about gender-based violence. Next slide. Allowing more discrimination against LGBTQ legitimate qua is what the language is they're using now. Legitimate qua youth in adoption and foster care agencies. Project 2025 would make it easier for states and child welfare agencies. And really, they talk a lot about religious exemptions as a way of promoting bigotry. So we want to be really cautious of this as we, children in our community who may be in that community. Next slide. Put Black communities and others that have historically borne the brunt of health impacts. We know we have experienced environmental harm in our communities by and large, and so this puts a huge impact. And so we want to make sure that the EPA rights are certainly protected for every citizen, but definitely marginalized communities. And then again, just some of the Supreme Court decisions that have come down recently. We see the way that the Supreme Court is currently stacked. It is not in favor of rights of citizens by and large that have differences. And so we certainly want to make sure that we're mindful of those types of discrimination as it relates to sexual orientation and gender identity, excuse me. Education, making education unaffordable and unwelcoming. Big piece, cutting federal loan programs is a big thing. And, for graduate students and immigrants, in terms of affording higher education, it would make it more difficult to get access to those funds as well. Making public schools more dangerous for legitimate qua students. And it would just remove some of the protections there. And then finally, undermining the government's ability to deliver for people by and large. You and I on this call, you and I on this Zoom, replacing nonpartisan federal employees with partisan loyalists. Really quickly, the government has two types of employees: merit-based and those who are appointees. What the Trump administration and Project 2025 want to do is to increase the number of appointees, those who work at the pleasure of the president, and reduce the number. You can go to the next slide. Reduce the number of merit-based. And so what that means is they're going to be shutting down a lot of the jobs that are based in DC. And you all know, if you're in the DC metropolitan area, my mother retired from the federal government. So listen, people have been in these jobs for decades. So they're going to relocate some of these DC-based jobs. That's going to impact people by and large. So we have to keep our eye out for this changing, what they call Schedule F in the federal government. The next slide. I think I'm almost done. All right, this is another very discriminatory practice. Administer ideologically biased and discriminatory tests for federal workers. We know in some jobs, yes, you have some types of assessments that you must take, but Project 2025 will issue problematic civil service tests for prospective federal employees, which can, really keep some people out of the opportunity for obtaining those, as we talked about here, security clearances. Project 2025 will remove civil servants' security clearance and politicize it. Meaning, if you're in the know, then you get that top secret clearance. But those who may have the credentials to get that, they can't. My final slide, friends, in the interest of time, we cannot let Project 2025 write the next chapter of our nation's history. I'm excited to answer any of your questions, and I apologize for any Wi-Fi issues. Be happy to share the PowerPoint as well.
Janice, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you very well.
Can you see me? Because
I see you.
I was in the black for a minute. So
all right.
First of all, that was very depressing.
I'm so sorry.
No, I mean, thank you for sharing. We need the information. But my first question is, who exactly is this supposed to benefit? Because it seems like they're taking a meat cleaver to the government and government function as we know it. They're trying to remove SMEs, subject matter experts. Who is this supposed to benefit? Who's this supposed to be good for?
So I think that there are some in our country who believe this way, who believe in a very conservative mindset. And I think that it is designed for conservative persons. And they believe that, government is too much involved in the daily aspects of our world, which is why, as I talked about briefly tonight, there's so many entities. They even want to get rid of NOAA. They don't really believe in climate and those just those kinds of things. It's really an ideological belief that is upheld by many, and certainly problematic. It's not something that brings us together, but very divisive, in my opinion. So
now, when you talk about their opinion and their agenda, I think it is important to point out that Donald Trump has never gotten more than 46 or 47% of the vote. He's lost both presidential elections he ran in. He lost to Hillary Clinton by almost 2.9 million votes. But there's the whole slavery era electoral college thing. We'll deal with that another time, probably in a broadcast or two in the next week or two. And then he lost to President Biden by 7 million votes. So their position does not represent a majority of the country. They present themselves as representing a majority, but they do not. And so since we are the majority, it's important for us to have our people understand that and exercise their power. I think about the fact that the Republicans are relying a lot on voter suppression, which we're going to get to in a couple of weeks. But again, if you have policies that are meant to benefit a majority of Americans, why do you need to suppress the vote? But since your policies don't benefit a majority of Americans, the less Americans who vote, the better. So what does that tell you, audience, about Project 2025 and what it's really intended to do? Now Donald Trump, Janice, has tried to distance himself and say, I don't know anything about it. but I think I heard you say that there are a number of people who put this together who are members of his past administration.
Right. So several members of his former administration are part of the sort of authors of this manifesto of conservative leadership. And also, if you just Google, the Heritage Foundation and Donald Trump, they laud him on having passed 64% in the first 180 days. So in the first 6 months of 2016, Donald Trump was very, very active, if you will, in implementing these policies that were put forth and through the Heritage Foundation. I brought it to that event that we had, Pastor Tillett. Remember, I shared it with you because I wanted you all to see. I believe that when we provide information and give people, the reality of what's before them, they can make informed decisions. And so, again, they are strategically, his campaign is strategically trying not to align him with this very right wing, very stressful. It's stressful to read this plan because
over and over again.
you're right. It affects all of us in various ways. But I wanted to also add, I didn't share explicitly, but the Department of Education as we know it will be eliminated, particular prior 25. So very concerning. We certainly want to make sure that people understand the impact on the ground level as it relates to this plan.
So Janice, some of my colleagues want to come in and ask you some questions as well. So we have a
All
Pastor
right.
Coates, Pastor Offer, Pastor Kay, Pastor Butler.
All righty.
What questions do you have for our expert this evening?
Hello, everybody.
Oh, wow.
I don't have a question. I don't have a question as much as to say what a great value it is to have this platform that we have right now.
Yeah.
And to have this information and to have so many people logging on right now, and even those who will catch this later, just to have you have access to this. You're getting factual information, not opinions. And many of you are weighing in. So I don't have any comments right now, but I'm glad to see my colleagues on here. And you see our faces because traditionally, historically, it has been the faces of Black pastors that have helped a lot of us make some very tough decisions, including when it comes to, how are we being impacted by decisions. So I'm glad to see my colleagues, and I want them to key in here. Hello, everybody.
One thing I wanted to say real quick, Janice, you were talking about how the Republicans and conservatives want government out of people's lives, but they're trying to monitor women's menstrual cycles and who's pregnant, and if they went somewhere and came back not pregnant. That's not even irony. That's just the height of hypocrisy. And they really think they're going to get away with this?
Well, if you look, I think you all were able to sort of watch the recent debate. And what we saw at debate was a very unhinged leader in Donald Trump. And I was grateful to see, Kamala really just sort of take him to task on some of those issues. So I'm hopeful that the American people also saw the same things because he didn't really have a plan, but it was more of, inciting, sort of the negativity, all the things that he stated. But again, all of America saw that, live and in living color a few weeks ago. And I'm hopeful that they'll take that with them when they go to the ballot box. That we need a leader who can get things done, but also is one we can be proud of as our leader. And so that's just my 2 cents on it.
That'd be nice, wouldn't it? A president we can be proud of. We've been proud of President Biden. Obviously, he's experiencing some normal life events as somebody who's older than 80, but he has carried out his job with distinction and with a singular focus on what's best for the people and not what's best for him and his financial class. Was that Karen or Tori that was trying to jump in?
No, I do have a question, and this question is coming from Honorable Shanika Henson, and her question is, can you tell us what's the rationale behind these radical changes?
Well, Dalga, thank you so much for that question. Listen, I think we're at a crossroads. There isn't really sort of a rationale that is one that we could look to say it makes sense or it's pragmatic. I think that our country over the past, I would say 8 years, if we want to put it in a bubble here, has really shifted and have been very polarized when we look at, let's just take Anne Arundel County. I went to the fair. There was a blow up of Donald Trump there, and people were taking pictures with it. So we're not so far removed when we talk about, people believe what they believe, and I can't. Again, there may be people on this call who are going to vote for him, and we have to understand that. But what I'm saying is, there isn't really a rationale that, to me, that we can qualify as valid. I just think that these are beliefs, and over time, people feel more emboldened to elevate their racist, ideologies because they have a leader in Donald Trump who says things publicly or does things that gives them that sort of gusto to get out there and say, hey, we can say these things about immigrants. We can have those conversations about this and that. So hopefully I did justice to your question, Delegate. But to me, I think that is moreover just a change of the tide in our country, and it's become very
Yes.
polarized, unfortunately.
Yes.
So what? Okay, we don't really know what the true rationale is. So, using our own imagination, if we will, what is it that they are expecting to do with gutting out the lower class, middle class? Because you're going to be gutting out a whole set of people. Where are they supposed to go? What are they supposed to do? Have you seen anything within that document that suggests what is the plan for that? What is the plan for
Project 2025, Pastor, is there is no concern for the everyday person. It's about, in their mind, that it's a radical shift. So the actual language of Project 2025 is supposed to be a rebuttal, their rebuttal to Project 1619. That's where they got the language, right? And so I was intrigued by that when I learned that. But to answer your question, it's really an elitist document. I mean, all the principles in there are designed to help big business, are designed to decentralize resources that generally help everyday people, which come through checks and balances in our government. So the fact that they want to destabilize government will impact people by and large, not just in our country, but globally. The way we do commerce, the way we do all kinds of things, international, all of these things will impact people. So there is no concern, in my opinion, from what I've gleaned from this, for the everyday person. It is about them shifting. They feel that our democracy is on the line. And so this plan is designed to whip us back into shape, per se.
Whip us. You said it, whip us.
Yes.
And you hit it right on the nose. It is a response to 1619. 1619 didn't just start. This is work that's really based around critical race theory and the reality of what our country is built upon. And so this is a response. This is a direct response, and it silences and it quiets the conscience of white America, so that white America does not have to face the real racist history that we have, that America has not been built on righteousness. And so they hide it behind so-called righteous or evangelistic leaders as well.
That's right.
Janice, would you mind just talking a little bit about the fact that Project 2025 on labor unions? Because you happen to mention some restrictions on overtime, but how will that affect labor laws?
So thank you so much, Dr. Tony, for that. I think there are so many ways. So this plan is not favorable at all to our labor unions. I've been on Zooms where labor has talked about, how this would impact, just them across the board. But I think when it comes down to like the overtime piece that I talked about, and I'll be happy to share. There's a 6-page document with all the different pieces. Miss Linda Davis, who's an activist in Anne Arundel County, put this document together and has freely shared it. So I want to make sure that all of you can share with your parishioners as well. But the big piece there is that it doesn't really allow for someone who's working class, just somebody comes hourly pay, it doesn't really allow them to move ahead. So the way that they'll impact I think the example that I saw was if someone was making $40,000 a year, the highest that they could potentially get is like maybe $50,000 based on the scale of Project 2025 was saying as it relates to overtime. Now, if you're getting overtime, you can really get money. but they want to make it so that they, minimize that option for those who really need it most, those who get the work done, those who are in our unions, who make the world go around, right? And so I think that there are just so many pieces, but I'd be happy to share a more deeper dive with you, Dr. Tony, on that as well.
Thank you.
Well,
So
gosh, yeah, go ahead,
What-
Steve.
So what I was going to say, I'm in the black again, but you can hear me. That's fine. Y'all know what I look like. So Pastor K talked about the mistreatment of immigrants, and we wanted to talk some about white so-called Christian nationalism. And so I'd like to make the connection here with that, because people who claim to be Christians have policies that do not reflect Christian values at all. The Bible says that we should welcome and be loving and treat favorably orphans and widows, visitors and foreigners. And yet they want to demonize them. Yeah, you can come in and pick our vegetables and fruit and then get out. No benefits, no health care, no nothing. And it almost sounds like they want us to work. They want to work us like Hebrew slaves. And then when we're done working, that we will quickly drop dead so they don't have to pay any pension or anything. This is really a setup. But Pastor K, what road did you want to take as far as Christian nationalism, so-called Christian nationalism is concerned?
First, thank you. I think where we want to go, and just to have a discussion, is for us to really see that Christian nationalism is definitely connected to Project 2025. Christian nationalists are those persons who help to author Project 2025. But we want to first try to define what is Christian nationalism. And I will have to say that the ideology of Christian nationalism is not necessarily an easy ideology to define, if you will. But basically, it is an ideology that believes that a nation should be governed by Christian beliefs and values and principles. It's not easily to define because Christian nationalism is not monolithic. There are different perspectives or degrees of Christian nationalism, if you will. And it's also not necessarily restricted to any particular nation or race. But however, for the context of this conversation, we want to look at Christian nationalism that has taken root here in America, the Christian nationalism that is authoring the Project 2025, and this Christian nationalism that is growing in the body of Christ. Christian nationalism here in America, it is the belief that America was blessed by God to be founded by Christians, and therefore this country should declare itself to be a Christian nation where all of our laws and our values are totally based on Christianity. So much so that it should be achieved by any means necessary. And we saw some of that on January 6th. The problem with Christian nationalism is twofold, if you will. Number one, it threatens our democracy. And number two, which really should be number one for us believers, and that is it dangerously undermines the truth of Jesus Christ and what he has taught. And because it undermines what Jesus teaches us, it therefore impacts how we deal with democracy, if you will. The problem with Christian nationalism is that it can sound like real Christianity. It uses all of the same 66 books of the Bible. It has a cross. It gathers on Sundays corporately, and it looks like it's the Christian church. It looks like that it is carrying out the will of the Lord. But the issue is that it is not a religious movement. It is a political movement. And what it is doing, it is using Jesus as a front to obtain power over people and issues that do not align with their beliefs. And Project 2025, as Janice has just given to us, is the blueprint of how Christian nationalism believes that our government and our society should operate. So it's a front. And the front of it is that they want a nation that looks like them, a nation that's of the same faith and basic of the same racial makeup. However, as we've already touched on, we was talking about, the 1619, Christian nationalism isn't a new concept. It has come on the forefront recently, coming on the stage with Trumpism and with Make America Great Again. But it is not a new concept. It was part of the playbook for colonizers when they arrived here on the shores of this land, and it is the basis that is used to for genocide of indigenous people here in America. It is the basis that was used for the enslavement of Black people, and it is the justification of segregation and Jim Crowism. So it is not a new concept at all. It has always been here with the intent of causing Christianity to be the main focus, and everyone is to come over to Christianity, but it's not so much of lifting up Christ, but it's more lifting up people being able to be empowered. And I want to add that whenever you have an ideology that's supposed to be Christian and it doesn't focus on who Jesus Christ is, then it is idolatry. It is not pointing to Jesus Christ. It is pointing to trying to obtain power. And so we have to be very mindful because, again, it can sound like Christianity. Just recently, I think it was down in Louisiana where the governor, put out that they want to have the 10 Commandments in all of the classrooms. And for some believers, I've even heard for some believers of sharing, they thought, oh, well, great, we got the 10 Commandments. But what about the Muslim in the classroom? What about the person who is an atheist? What about the person who is of another religion at all? And we sometimes think that is God's way, but it's not. Jesus wasn't anything about forcing his teaching on anyone. He shared his teaching, and it was up to us to decide. And so as believers, we have to be very in tune. Don't just take something because it looks good, sounds good, but really look below the surface of it and to find out exactly what they're talking about, because we will find that this form of Christianity that Christian nationalism pushes is really not about the Jesus that we find in the Bible. Jesus is all about inclusion. He's not about exclusion. He teaches us that we are to love our neighbors as ourselves, meaning that we are to treat our neighbors with kindness regardless of their religion, or if they have of no religion, whether regardless of their color or their ethnicity. It doesn't matter the gender or sexual orientation. He is not about division, but he's all about unity. He's all about justice for all. He's all about welcoming the immigrants, because at the end of the day, Jesus himself had to be an immigrant and had to escape from a hostile government. So with this Project 2025 and Christian nationalism being right there in the mix, right in the middle, it is important for us to be attentive. It is important for us as believers to rightly divide the word, and so that we know how to address it, and so that we don't get fooled and caught in with the okie doke and find ourselves going down a path that is opposed to what Jesus Christ teaches. So that's basically it in a nutshell. And to be honest, as I close up on my part, to be honest, as Christians, we do need to address it, but because Christian nationalism is basically made up here in this country of white evangelicals, then we call upon our white brothers and sisters who know the truth of Jesus Christ to confront those who are distorting his truth, and so that we can put where he's supposed to be and rightly divide the word, and then at the same time have a country, a nation that is really about unity and not one about divisiveness. And so that's kind of Christian nationalism, if you will, in a nutshell.
May I make one observation? All of this supposed Christianity and faith and Jesus, first of all, Jesus wouldn't recognize any of this madness. He would not. It's like y'all, you hear about people testifying, y'all testifying. This ain't got nothing to do with anything I showed you, demonstrated to you. That's not why I died for you. But as far as Pastor Kay said, that this is really, they are, what's the term you use? Using Jesus as a front. I love that. I'm taking that. I'm gonna say they're using Jesus as a front, because if you look at U.S. history, they came and these are stolen lands built on the backs of stolen people.
Stolen people. Mm-hmm.
Our ancestors were minding their business in Africa, stolen from Africa to come here and do their work for them. And then the lands, of course, were stolen from other of our ancestors, for those of us who also have some indigenous blood in us, as their lands were taken and they were just moved farther and farther west and onto reservations and
Right.
completely dispossessed of their land. So when people want to be hostile toward immigrants, I have a shirt that I saw online. I said, I got to buy it. And basically there's a montage of people with Native American features. And it says, we're the ones who should have built a wall.
Wall. Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. Yeah.
And Steve, don't leave out the fact that a lot of this so-called Christian work was done in Africa as well, as they tried to, quote unquote, Christianize people of color, because initially they believed that people of color fell under the Hamitical theory that we were dark because we were cursed.
Right.
And so, this was a lot of the work that was done to sway us away from Africa and then to enslave us. So a great deal of the roots of white Christianity are still very much alive in Africa.
And to dispossess them of their land and resources, which is still happening today. Absolutely.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
No, I was going to say, when you really start looking at the history of it, it goes all the way back. I was just reading up on it and was talking, of course, when Christopher Columbus came across the ocean blue, but when he returned, to my understanding, he had about like 16, 17 other ships, and he came back and they came back with the intent of taking over the land, taking over the people, and which was in essence saying it to bringing them under Christianity, but in essence, again, it was to control. It was all about power. It had absolutely nothing to do with truly evangelizing.
And so then, brothers and sisters, here's the question I have for you. What have you heard on this broadcast today that makes you say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea? I'd like 4 more years of that. I would like to upend the constitutional republic known as the United States of America so that it can become a MAGA republic led by maggots, M-A-G-A-T-S, led by maggots, and hostile to anything that we the people need. I don't know about you all, but I am just still bewildered when I look at polls, and even though Trump never gets to 50% or more, it's like, okay, but who were the 46 and 47%? Did you not see the same thing we saw on January 6th? Did you not hear this man say, maybe if you drink bleach, you can get rid of COVID? Really? And they want more of that? So family, our mission is to evangelize our family and our friends and our neighbors and our co-workers in a political sense, to get them to see what's going on, to understand the risk, and to push back with that sacred weapon that the late Congressman John Lewis always talked about, which is our vote. That is the equalizer. We're never
Mhm.
going to have as much money as who's the guy at the Washington Post and Amazon, Jeff Bezos. We're not going to have Bezos money. We're not going to have Elon Musk money. But Elon Musk has one vote, and so does Bezos, and so do you. Get to the polls and vote. If you're not registered, and we're going to, I don't know if we have it prepared today, Apostle, that we wanted to have the links that people could go to. Well, I'll just say Black Voters Matter. If you go to blackvotersmatter.org, they have a page there that you can check your voter registration status, because a lot of us think we're registered to vote, but there are states that have been purging votes. For instance, the state of Texas, between 2021 and now, has purged over 1.1 million people from the ballot. Now, from the rolls. Now, half of them were dead. Okay, 500,000 are dead, but what about the other 600,000? The intent is, we know our policies are unpopular. We're just going to make it so less people can vote, and hopefully we can eke out an electoral college victory. Blackvotersmatter.org. Check your voter registration status. Even if you are sure you're registered, check anyway. And if you see that you have been dispossessed of your vote, of your status, registration status, you still have an opportunity to register. Do we have that panel, Craig, with the dates, the registration deadlines around the country?
Yes, that'll be coming up.
Okay.
But we want to emphasize that for those that are online where you have access to chatting and responding, the links are now in the chat where you're streaming from. All you have to do is click that link and it'll take you right to blackvotersmatter.org and iwillvote.com.
Okay. Well, we are grateful to you for joining us this evening. We said it was going to be an hour. We're going to try and hold to that. Pardon us for any technological issues. We'll try and work on some of those before next week. We will be back next.
Make sure you tune in next Tuesday, October 1st, for an in-depth discussion on the ins and outs of voting and why the Black vote has always mattered. Now back to our panel for final remarks.
Well, Steve, you've disappeared again. I mean, you really love being Black. I can see that. I think because this is so important that everyone recognize that pastors are stepping aside from the role of Sunday morning pastoring to speak with their personal voice that we have a right to utilize. And I think it's good to have our pastors greet each of you and share final comments as we spread the word for people to join us on next Tuesday night for part 2 of this. So can we please, Dr. Butler?
Hi, my name is Dr. Tori Butler. I am the pastor of Asbury Town United Methodist Church in Severna Park, Maryland. I got involved in this because I believe that our voice use our voices, our words, our bodies to tell the story, to make opportunities for other people. There are people that have marched, there are people that have died for the right to vote, for a right to have agency. And so it's important for us that you know what to do, how to vote, how to show up in the polls, how to do mail-in voting, how to read the entire ballot. We want you to be informed in your decision. And so that is why I am participating and inviting my church and whoever else is in my platform to participate in this seminar series, because our voices matter. And the only way that that can be seen is if we show up at the polls. So thank Dr. K. I want to thank Janice for sharing with us on this evening. And we continue to invite you back next Tuesday for more information.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. Pastor Jay? Oh, Pastor Jay, we don't have your voice. There we go. Nope, we don't have your voice yet. Wait, let's try to restore your voice. We're going to work on that. Pastor K?
Yes, I will just leave with what you've heard today about Project 2025 should be enough to drive you to the polls. This is one of the most crucial elections in the history of this country in our lifetime. And it is to determine the direction of this country, whether it's going to continue to be democratic, or we are going to completely change and become, instead of a democracy, becoming a dictatorship. So I encourage everyone to listen to this again as far as Project 2025 to get that understanding. It is not about the stimulus check that some people are caught up on. This is not about that. It is about paying attention to what is going on around us and what people are trying to do to us. So we're just going to encourage everyone, please get out and vote, talk to your loved ones, everyone. They cannot sleep on this election.
Thank you so much, Pastor Dr. K. Pastor J, let's try your voice again. We can't hear you. And I promise you all, he has an amazing voice and a viewpoint. Pastor J, if you put it in the private chat, we'll say it for you. But Janice, we just can't thank you enough. We thank you for being so articulate and being so involved. And then we have Pastor Steve. So we have no voice for Jay and no picture for Steve. So Steve, do you have some final words? And then I have a few final words, and we have an announcement, because there are a lot of people that are going to work now, boots on the ground, to make sure we get people registered to vote. And several of those people right here in the city of Annapolis, Tony Strong Pratt, Lisa DeJesus, they have been spearheading an entire group of people, along with many of our representatives, delegates, members of the community, our churches. And we want to encourage you to come out and help them canvass the community of Bywater Mutual Homes in Annapolis on Saturday at 3 p.m. All right. So please show up. There are so many people that people perish for lack of knowledge. This platform here is a way to get the information out. Okay, I heard a voice. Is that Jay? No, it's not Jay. Okay, Brother Jay, we thank you, sir, and thank Harvest Alive family and the Crusade family for being a part. I promise you'll hear his voice next week, because next week we take this a little deeper. We're going to really get into why our vote really matters. You know, this was just setting the platform today to expose some things that maybe you were not aware of. A lot of you just heard about Project 2025, recently, and it's been brewing forever. Okay. White nationalism. Many of you didn't know, but you know, okay. And you really know that you know. And so we can't unlearn what we've learned. So I want you to do some digging, do some probing, see for yourself. Okay. And then come back and join us again next Tuesday night at 7 p.m. It is 8 p.m. We're getting ready to sign off right now. May the peace of God be with all of you in Jesus'